for Garden Tour 3. Let's go. So let's start our tour up here with our tomatoes and peppers. We have a handful of varieties of tomatoes as well as peppers. As we walk through, I will try and tell you what the variety is, and if you're interested, where I got them. I also want to point out issues that we are starting to see, even though we are on top of the maintenance of our tomatoes and peppers. It's been a challenging year with pests, potentially with fungus. So let's take a look at what we have here. You can see this first row of tomatoes. We have about half of them on a cattle panel. This is something we saw online. Usually we use round cages that we made out of a concrete reinforcing wire. Wanted to try this. I do like the fact that I can weed at the bottom without having to reach my hand through bars. You can also harvest things pretty easily that way. A couple different varieties that are brand new to us. Depending on how they produce, we will see if we grow them again. This first variety here is from Baker Creek. This is a yellow pear tomato. We have another yellow pear tomato that has given us a couple ripened fruits, but we're still waiting on that. The next type of tomato that we have with just a little bit of blushing, this is also from Baker Creek. This is a purple Russian. What I can share about this plant, we have 3 of them, 1 on this cattle panel and 2 across the way in circular containment concrete rebar structures, is that these plants from day 1 have looked absolutely sad. They always have leaf curling regardless of their location. So we haven't quite figured out what is causing this. We did have a couple plants last year that had this leaf curl. We are seeing it in a couple more plants. Oh my goodness, do you hear that? My chickens are having their morning meeting, perhaps. So I am not sure if it is this particular variety. I have read that others have seen this plant is easily stressed out, but clearly she is probably 7 feet tall. So I am not too worried about her current situation. She is producing, she's got a significant amount of fruit on the bottom, probably 12 or more tomatoes plus more forming. So I'm not freaking out yet. I did also notice that this beefsteak tomato is also showing signs of curling, which I didn't see a couple weeks ago. Now we did get 1.5 inches of rain over the past 2 days, so it could be an overwatering issue on this one. Again, I'm not too worried about it yet. We have another beefsteak here, and then we have our row of Roma tomatoes. Now these are indeterminate plants. What I like about these is that the fruit will ripen all at once, so that when I am ready to can, it should shorten the amount of time that I am pulling out my canning equipment, processing tomatoes, whereas these other guys here, you can see they are, I'll back up a little bit, they are significantly taller. They are indeterminate, so as long as they have something holding them up, they will continue to grow. Now, the ones that are already exceeding the cattle panel, haven't quite figured that out yet, but gardening is learning every single day. This is not my profession. This is my hobby. This is a lifestyle that we've chosen, but I learn every day. I try not to beat myself up too much because there's just problems all the time. But what I'm finding is with problems, you have successes, and you can't win everything. So it is what it is. The other thing I wanted to point out here, I'm already noticing, I'll try and zoom in here really carefully, this yellowing and spotting on the leaves. I've done some Googling. Again, this is not my profession. I think this is early blight, or leaf spot. One or the other, I'm not really sure. I'm leaning towards blight only because it's very common in this area with hot and humid conditions. If you've ever been in Pennsylvania, that is pretty much our entire summer. So I am removing leaves. Now I will come through today and remove leaves and dispose of them. They will not go in my compost pile. But something like this is caused by a fungus, and those spores will overwinter and they will stay in the soil. So that is one of the best ways to support crop rotation. So I will not be planting tomatoes here next year in hopes that the spores don't affect future crops that are planted here. So I will not plant tomatoes here. They will go down a few more beds so that they aren't exposed to those spores early on. So continuing on, we've got marigolds planted in here as well. That is a natural pest deterrent. We have basil in here. It's already starting to flower, probably due to the heat and humidity. What I wanted to show you guys, if you can look down in here, you can see that it has this kind of elbowing. I'm not sure what the technical term is, but if you want your plant to continue to kind of bush out, if you go ahead and you break off right at that elbow, so you can see that those remain, that will create 2 additional branches off of your plant. The other important reason why you want to remove the flowering is this is your plant's way of surviving. So the goal of your plant is to flower, to create seeds, to have animals like birds come and eat those seeds and drop those seeds elsewhere. What it does to your plant is it actually will change the flavor for you. So it changes the chemical structure of the leaves. So if you go ahead and you go in and you remove those flowers, you're going to maintain that sweet basil flavor that you want. I'm just adding to my list today. I have to tend to the tomatoes. I have to come in and remove the flowers off of the basil. We have our resident barn/house cat. He doesn't like to go far. Say hello, Crackle. Or not. In this row here, we have a couple different peppers. The first several peppers are called Creole peppers. They get about this size, a little bit smaller than a green pepper. They have this cute, wrinkly skin. They will turn red. These are a type of sweet pepper. Next to them, we have a series of jalapeno peppers. This is one of our favorites. Didn't think it would be, but I found a recipe. It's called Cowboy Candy. I will post a link to the recipe for Cowboy Candy in the tutorial. It is one of our absolute favorite things to can. I also use this to make a homemade type of rotel where I'm using tomatoes and jalapenos, so that's a good addition for chili. So we've got several of those plants. And then down here, these are Alma peppers or sweet paprika peppers. They only grow about 2 inches. And they are a type of sweet pepper. Right now they're yellow. They come in yellow, but they change to red. So these are actually a great raw eating pepper, a sweet pepper, but also they are used to dehydrate so that you can make paprika powder. We've got a couple of those and they've been doing very well as well. If we swing around, not only do we have more basil and marigolds tucked in, but we have more tomatoes. And you can take a look at what we've done here. We've used the concrete rebar. I'm just over 5 feet. This is about 5 feet tall. And this is what we use to hold up our tomatoes pretty independently for most of the year. We've had great growth on our tomatoes despite the fungus that we've seen, despite some of the pest pressure that we've had. I'm going to try not to freak out, but the garden has become my baby. And I hate to see my babies sick. I hate to see issues, but we still have fruit. So it will be what it will be. There's some things that I can control. I will go through here and spray neem oil, which not only will help with pests, but also helps to control fungus issues. I've read that once the fungus starts, You can control it, but you can't really prevent it. So I will be applying the neem oil in a sprayer to hopefully slow down the growth of the fungus on these plants so that we can continue to harvest well through September. Here we have, these are cherry tomatoes. Haven't picked any of these yet. We do have some blushing going on. We also have some of that same blight symptomology on those lower leaves. If we walk just a little bit farther, a little bit more blushing on our cherry tomatoes. Then we have our beefsteak tomatoes. Again, we're seeing some rolling. I think it's because of all of the rain that we've had the past couple of days. But I have never in my life seen tomato plants this loaded with peppers. I wish I could shove my camera in here. There are just 24 tomatoes on this plant. Maybe 3 dozen in the first 3 or so feet. And if you continue to walk down, these plants are absolutely loaded with fruit. So if we can keep this fungus in check, if that's what it is, keep these plants pruned, try and maintain the watering, we should have a great crop of beefsteak tomatoes. Look at how beautiful those are. My least favorite tomatoes of the year are these purple Russians. These have been the saddest looking plants I have ever seen. No matter what pruning I do, no matter the water, they have looked absolutely sad. They're still growing. So we've got our plants over 7 feet tall. I'm not stressing out. This was an experimental plant that was one of the freebies if you've ever ordered from Baker Creek Seeds. With every order, they send you a free seed packet, and one of them was purple Russian tomatoes. Why not? Could be us, could be the area that these seeds prefer, but we'll see what happens. And then on the very end here, we have our last yellow pear, and we've picked some of these already. Plant's looking pretty good overall. From afar, it doesn't look as bad as up close. We'll still get fruit. One thing really cool I wanted to show you. So I've got these tomato plants here that are significantly smaller than the rest. As you've seen on my posts on Instagram and Facebook, I declare myself a science nerd. One of the things that I've learned along the way is that when you're pruning tomatoes and you have those pesky suckers, which are the extra stems that grow in the armpits of the tomatoes. I'll see if I can find one here in the rest of our tour. If you take those and you put them in a cup of water on your counter inside and you allow them to grow roots and plant them, you can grow another tomato plant. So this guy here, this guy right here, and this one down here, these were all suckers that were water rooted, and now we have free tomato plants essentially. They are not showing any signs of stress. I'm wondering if they're actually more healthy in their small stature. I have no idea what kind they are. I picked probably 30 different suckers and put them all in a container. They weren't labeled, so it's going to be a surprise as well to see what we get from them. This little guy right here, I was shocked. Science experiment on the farm. I took a sucker off of one of my tomato plants and I said, you know what? I'm not going to water root this. I'm going to put it right in the ground. I put it right in the ground. This thing looked dead for about a week and a half. Like, my husband came up and was like, why do you have this in the ground? It's dead. And I said, have faith. This is not dead. And we are probably a month or so out from me taking that sucker and just sticking it in the ground without water rooting. Guys, we have a tomato plant. So don't give up hope on your plants. Plants are a lot more resilient. Their goal is to survive. So they will do whatever they can do to survive. Again, here's one of our water-rooted surprises here. Here, actually, I'm not going to break this off because I'll probably break the whole plant on camera. This is a sucker. This is a rather large sucker. We have a main stem coming up through here. And then you see here's the main stem. And here is the arm of the plant. And then in the elbow, we've got this extra plant. This is going to rob the rest of the plant of energy. This will actually form additional flowers on the plant. But my goal, I try and keep it to one stalk where I can. Sometimes they get away from me. Here, I'll show you right here. Here is another little sucker. So we've got the main stem here on the left, and then we've got the arm on the right. And this guy right here, I like to pick them off when they are this small. This is what I water rooted. So all of these little hairs at the bottom are potential roots. Stuck this in water, allowed roots to form, and in a month, this is what I have for free tomato plants. That's what I like. We have our Soul banana pepper plant here. This isn't one of our favorites. I do like color though, so we did grow one. Right next to these guys, we have our cayenne peppers, which were staked up a couple days ago. Let's see if we can. These grow green, and when they are ripe, they turn red. I use these to make pepper flakes, which are delicious. I also use these to make homemade hot sauce, like the Frank's that you would buy at the store. Such a delicious blend of vinegar and spice. You just can't beat it. And then at the end here, one of my fellow homesteaders sent me cosmos. I've never grown them before. I probably have too many here, but it is what it is. Hoping to get some flowers soon. She looks happy. And that is our tomatoes and our peppers here. Brand new to the farm. I'll back up a little bit. We bought another cattle panel to make another trellis. One of the things that we've never grown before was winter squash. And our goal of being self-sufficient, we wanted to grow as many different things as we could. And when I say I'm tired of spending $7 on a spaghetti squash that is not very big, I'm not kidding. And those aren't even the organic ones. So you will see in this row a couple different trellis styles. I totally overplanted. Maybe I overplanted, maybe I didn't, maybe the plants are happy. We've got a couple different types of items growing for different reasons. This guy, look at him. We have a Big Mac's pumpkin on the trellis. So this is about 5 feet off the ground. Just hanging there. I might hammock it. It doesn't look too stressed out yet. We do have a couple more. If we go up and over, we'll right up in here. We've got another one coming. We've got this hoop set at about 6 feet so that my husband can mow underneath it. It was much better than the alternative of letting it grow on the ground on this side. I was having trouble getting the hose up in here. But this is a clustered mess of really exciting things. Not only are these flowers beautiful, but if we go down really low, you can see this is our first crop of spaghetti squash. At least that's what I think they are. We've got dozens and dozens and dozens of spaghetti squash, or what I think is spaghetti squash, in these plants. They are up high, they are down low. I'm even having trouble showing you what we have going on in here. But this is a complete overgrown, lovely situation. What we have growing here, in this general area, we put in one Big Mac's pumpkin that we trained to go up and over. Now I think that some of the spaghetti squash are also starting to climb that, because in here, in this area, we have 4 spaghetti squash plants that were started. Down here, we did 2 different techniques for our winter squash. Successful, sort of, but these are growing so much bigger than I ever thought they would. We have a combination of Amish pie squash, which was given to me by a friend in Georgia. She said this was one of her favorite squash to grow and they needed very little maintenance. That is the ones that have these white ribs on their older leaves. We also have a regular butternut squash, and I believe that is in this area. And then down here we also have more spaghetti squash. So we're trying a couple different things. I have a cattle panel trellis here that I was teaching these vines to grow up. I also planted some of the items on the ground, and then as a last ditch effort to try and stay organized, we put that hoop on the end. It appears as though all of the plants are fairly happy. This one's already starting to come out into the grass, which is what happened with the Big Mac's pumpkin that we decided to hoop. I am excited for these. Look at this already. This is probably 50% larger than what I would buy in the store. We've got this guy growing here, and again, dozens and dozens. If I were to be able to walk down here and peek through all of those, you would see all of the beautiful squash that are forming. You would think that I've done something wrong here. These are our potatoes, and this is our red potato. This is actually expected. So from here to where you see the plants being a little bit more healthy, these plants are starting to die off, which is what you will see in your potato plants. Never grown potatoes before. What I think I'm supposed to do, and tell me if I'm not, I'm supposed to wait for these plants to die back and then allow those tubers, the actual potatoes, to harden up in the ground for about 2 weeks. So not sure when that clock starts ticking. These don't look fully dead to me, but we'll give it a couple more weeks. We've got some dates written on the calendar to see what happens, but we've got our red potatoes here. Down here, we've got our Yukon Gold, and it kind of makes sense. So red potatoes typically come in earlier for us. They don't store as long, so these are the potatoes we're going to be eating first. These Yukon Gold potatoes are potatoes that are better suited for storage. They typically come out of the ground later. So these plants are much more healthy looking. They don't look as dead or as dying as these other ones are. We haven't explored. We did pull up a couple red potatoes probably about 2 weeks ago. It was exciting to see what they look like then. It'll be super exciting to see this as well. One problem it's causing is I planted some onions in the adjacent bed to the potatoes, and as the potatoes are starting to get tall and fall over, they are pushing the onions to the side. It is what it is. If they grow, they grow. We probably have 80 or so onions with one onion, this is so pretty, that bolted. So apparently this particular onion out of all 80 was under some type of stress and decided to reproduce. Onions are biennial, which means if I left these onions in the ground this year and I didn't pick them to eat, the tops would die back. The onions in the ground would survive, they would overwinter, and then next spring the greens would grow back and they all would get this flower, which then creates the seeds. Biennial, which means every 2 years. So, fun fact. A few of our zinnias were transplanted here along with some wildflowers. I've had a heck of a time trying to identify them. I was really hoping that it was chamomile. I don't think it is though. It came with the soil, but they did look pretty for a long time. They've lost a lot of their white leaves, but they'll stay there for now. We've got another cosmos here, and then we've got a fairly empty row. About a week ago, we pulled out the rest of our pea plants. So we harvested a lot from this area. They were pretty spent. We still have the posts in the ground. Our goal here is to plant some additional red beets. I would love to can red beets. We use them not only for dinner, if you're a Harvard beet fan, but we also use them to make red beet eggs, a local favorite. If you like red beet eggs, shout out to all of you. I thought it would be a good idea. We have our first planting here our patch of red beets. So I figured to do the rest of the row here in red beets, that should give us plenty of canning fodder. At the end, we did have some radishes. There's a small row that's open. They did go to seed. We do have those plants drying so that we can plant again in the future. But our kale and our Swiss chard, even though we are picking it hard and we are sharing it with lots of people, it's looking really good. A close-up look at look at this guy. I think I'm going to pull him for dinner tonight. These are our red beets. Look how beautiful. We'll make some Harvard beets tonight. I'll put that in my picking basket so that I don't forget. The hope, like I said, is to be able to can a decent number of jars of beets in this area where it's open. We have a random carrot that came up. I'm not a good carrot grower. I've come to terms with that. We've got another almost empty row. Yesterday I came through and I picked all of the remaining cabbage. So we have a couple cabbage stored in our refrigerator. I think there's 2 heads. The rest of the red cabbage, which was over 20 pounds, I shredded, and it is now in a food grade bucket fermenting in my basement. What's remaining is a couple different types of green cabbage, but it's really sad. We've had pest pressure here, so we've had loopers, and I've also spotted slugs. Now, it did rain, and what the rain did is it washed off the DE that I use to kill those little critters that are eating the leaves. The other thing that my mantra is, if the bugs don't want to eat it, I don't want to eat it. If the bugs aren't eating it, it's likely because there is some type of poison on the plants. When you go to the grocery store, everything is uniform. There's never a hole or a chew mark in a leaf. They're using something that the bugs really don't like. What you'll find with organic treatments like diatomaceous earth, we call that DE for short, or neem oil, is that it wears off. So if it rains, if it's very humid and it's been, a week or more, you have to reapply. I have to reapply. Sometimes the weather permits for that. Sometimes it doesn't. Could we lose some of these plants? Maybe. We will see. This row, the intention is, we'll see if these heads of cabbage actually give us something, but we are going to plant our second round of peas in here. So we'll have a whole row this time. If we move to the next row here, we've got our pickling cucumbers. These were hit really hard. Talk about pests and talk about issues. We had cucumber beetles on about 50% of our garden. They are finally bouncing back. I did can the first round of pickles just about 2 days ago. So we've got our pickling cucumbers here. We've got Blue Lake bush beans up here, and I'll wait till I wrap to the corner, but it just looks like a whole lot of leaves until you actually take a moment and pull up a side, and you'll see beans everywhere. That will be on my list. So, my list so far: apply neem oil to the tomatoes, cut off diseased leaves of tomatoes, apply DE to cabbage, pick green beans. I think that might be it. We've got some Brussels sprouts tucked in here. They're starting to form. This is our last time probably growing Brussels sprouts in the spring. They're just not happy. Hey, we've got a big weed here. That's fun. Have to pull that out. And then down here, completely overgrown, poor planning on my part. These beans were supposed to help with the pests on the Brussels sprouts and or the eggplant. The eggplant had flea beetle damage, and now they're competing for sunlight. We've got a little bit of a bigger one here. There's some flowers on them. The plants look really sad, flea beetles. They seem to be persistent little buggers. even though I was putting DE on. So I'm hoping those plants bounce back. They get some new leaves. The flea beetles seem to have gone to other pastures, which is good because Green Pig Farm is really tired of dealing with them. Over here, we have celery, overplanted, totally. I've enjoyed sharing it with lots of people. I've frozen several bags so that I can use it for things like potato soup and pot pie and things that where they're cooked into the flavor. Right next to this is our experimental patch of corn. It looks like corn. It's upwards of 3-4 feet tall. I can't speak to it. I've never grown corn before. It looks pretty good, right? Let's see. Uh-oh. I just saw a cucumber beetle here. I'm telling you guys, the war in this garden is insane. Turtle beans. Oh, look at this. Do you have Japanese beetles too? They are eating my plants to shreds. DE works on these guys too, but look. Oh. Seriously? I have to come up, since we had about an inch of rain last night, I have to come up and apply more DE. We've got some melons here. Watermelon, honeydew, cantaloupe. This was the only melon I thought we had. When the cucumber beetles came through, they absolutely annihilated my plants. And I wasn't sure that we would be getting any melons, but this gave me hope. And then 2 days ago, don't ask me how this happened. You can take a look at this plant here. We are trying to grow one of our watermelons on the ground. I totally missed this, probably for a couple of weeks. How do you miss a watermelon of that size? I mean, look at that. I did, but I needed to see this. It was a couple days ago, and I was having one of those days where nothing was going right in the garden. I was finding bugs everywhere. I was bummed about the Japanese beetles. I don't know, it just wasn't a good day. And then when my husband found this, it was like all was right in the world. The other thing I forgot to show you, we're going to have to backtrack a little bit. Mexican sour gherkins. This is another type of cucumber that we have planted. If this isn't the cutest cucumber you have ever seen, you pick them, they get to be a little bit bigger than this, more like this guy. Tell me that wouldn't zhuzh up any veggie tray. You could make refrigerator pickles with these. There's no prep other than maybe washing the outside if you'd like. I've been known to eat these right from the garden. Very prolific. Point out we've got another one of our trellises here that we're training all of the cucumbers to go up. And then this trellis here has the different types of melons, along with the melons on the ground. Over here we have a Kajari melon. Not sure if we'll get fruit on here. This one, the cucumber beetles were absolutely persistent with eating that down to the ground, and I kept replanting and replanting, and they were going after the seedlings, and it was just an absolute mess. In here, I can't remember if these are honeydew or cantaloupe. I'll have to check the tag. But we've had a couple sightings. I thought I could find more. We've got one here. Oh, here we go. So maybe we'll get some melons. And then we've got our summer squash. We've got yellow crooked neck squash. These seeds, guys, I got at the dollar store for 10 cents. The packs were 10 for $1. I used them last season. I used them this season. Definitely getting my money's worth out of those. The other one from the 10-cent pack were the zucchini. Just about ready to pick here. Looking good. So 10 cents. And we're getting, I don't know, $20, $30, $40 worth of food from 10 cents. Now we are eating squash a lot. The remnants of the garlic patch here, we pulled those out this week as well. Those are curing. Before we wrap around and I show you my husband's probably favorite plant here, we've got patty pan squash. So it looks like I'll have to add picking of squash to this video. Very simple to make. You can boil them, you can saute them. I tend to saute them. Couple more rows here. This is gardening at its finest. This is a bed that I do have to weed. These big ferns are supposed to be here. The strawberries are supposed to be here. The asparagus that haven't ferned yet are supposed to be here. The cat maybe is supposed to be here, but all of these other weeds are not. I'm sorry guys, not a perfect gardener here, so I have to come through and clean out this bed. The asparagus will continue to fern until next year, and then we'll start picking again next spring. We've got our patch of prettiness here. We've got some zinnias, some weeds. We do get weeds here. And then we have our raspberries, which, have you learned anything yet? We have to get DE on these plants because the Japanese beetles love them. And because we haven't had a really good winter in quite some time, you know those grubs in the ground? Those are your Japanese beetles. So I haven't found of a good way to treat Japanese beetles in the ground, but we can work on trying to have these guys not shred my plants. We're in our first harvest of raspberries here. Perhaps we should start eating Japanese beetles. I don't think we'd go hungry anytime soon. But we're still getting fruit. We just have Japanese beetles here. Any of you have trouble with those? That concludes our tour. Tour number 3. Thanks for hanging out with us.